Mike Pondsmith provided an update on what players can expect from CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 sequel, revealing that the game will feature a second city, and he describes it as Chicago Gone Wrong. Roll this up over at phantompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. And during an appearance at the Digital Dragons Conference in Poland, Pondsmith shared this. Last week, I was wandering around talking to different departments and seeing what they have. I spent a lot of time talking to one of the environment guys, and he was explaining how the new place in Orion, because there's another city we visit, not telling you any more than that, but there is another city we visit, Night City is still there. And I remember looking at it and going, yeah, I understand the feel that you're going for this, and this really does work, and it doesn't feel like Blade Runner. It feels more like Chicago Gone Wrong. And I said, yeah, I can see this working. Obviously, his comment here implies that he is clearly still consulting with CD Projekt Red for their Project Orion Cyberpunk 2077 sequel, and he confirmed that in this interview. He says he's not doing it to the extent that he was with Cyberpunk 2077, but he does have kind of an intermediary that is doing much of that, but he is still working with CD Projekt Red and talking with some of the top creators on the game regarding Project Orion. What I found really interesting about Pondsmith's comments is that it comes after CD Projekt Red Associate Game Director Pavel Sasko revealed that the first game was not dystopian after he had visited multiple cities in California, or at least not dystopian enough. During an appearance on CD Projekt Red's Answered podcast, Sasko said, "Being from Europe is like interesting. I sometimes feel like I'm in a camera and some other reality and just observing and taking snapshots." He then recalled, I remember us traveling a couple of times to, LA, San Francisco when working on Cyberpunk. And then after we sort of did the game, we shipped it, and I did even more traveling. Now when I'm in the US, I see that we didn't push the envelope far enough in some places. He said, for instance, let's say the homeless crisis, and so on. When I look at it, I'm like, we weren't far enough in 77. We thought that we were dystopian, but we just touched the surface. Executive producer Dan Hernberg, who is working with Sasko on Project Orion, then added, we had one homeless person in a tent somewhere. Yes, and Americans wow, that's nothing. You need a whole city, So it is very different in some of those areas where even when I played Cyberpunk, that you kind of see things like that, and you're wait, someone's oh, that's really bad. And you're no, that's barely scratching the surface of the differences, these subtle differences. Sasko then replied, exactly. We thought oh yeah, we are being edgy, with all that stuff. And I'm my walk to the train every day is more edgy sometimes. So the fact that Pondsmith is saying that it's Chicago gone wrong, we might be seeing the same mistakes here because, Chicago obviously extraordinarily crime-ridden, lots of gang violence happening in that city. Now, I think most of that is obviously taking place on the south side, but there's all kinds of really negative crime statistics. So we'll see if they make it worse than Cyberpunk 2077 and if it becomes actually more dystopian than what they did with that game when they're realizing that they didn't even make it dystopian enough. We'll see if they're able to do that here with Chicago, if it actually is worse than what is currently happening, or if they, again, kind of make the same mistake they did with Cyberpunk 2077, and it's not as dystopian as real-life California cities have become. But that is your update from Mike Pondsmith on CD Projekt Red's Project Orion, their follow-up to Cyberpunk 2077. There will be another city, and it's being described as Chicago gone wrong. Let me know what you make of this in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.
Why would you be afraid of the people? Why are you not afraid of God instead of man?